At 3 a.m., my best friend sent me a video from a nightclub. My fiancé was pressed against a guy at the bar while he drank whiskey and smiled. 15 minutes later, I was there, and when I saw them, I woke up because my phone would not stop vibrating on the nightstand. Not ringing, vibrating. Short bursts, one after another, the kind that tells you someone is panicking but trying not to sound like it. I reached for it without checking the time, still half asleep, already irritated. Then I saw the hour in the corner of the screen. 3 a.m. The name on the screen was Landon Pierce. Landon did not call at 3 in the morning unless something had gone wrong in a way that could not wait. We had known each other for nearly 15 years, long enough that emergencies had a specific rhythm to them. This was not a drunk call. This was not a joke. The vibration kept going even after the call stopped, replaced by message alerts stacking one after another. I sat up in bed and opened the chat. 3 video files waited there, each stamped with times only minutes apart. Beneath them was a single line of text. You need to see this now. I did not press play right away. That hesitation lasted maybe 2 seconds, but it stretched longer in my head. I told myself it was probably nothing serious. Someone who looked like Sienna. Bad lighting. A coincidence. Lies always start gently. I tapped the first video. The camera angle was shaky, handheld, pointed toward a crowded nightclub bar washed in blue and purple light. Music thumped hard enough that I could feel it even through the phone speaker. People moved in and out of frame, laughing, leaning close to hear each other. Then the camera steadied. Sienna Moore stood at the bar, turned sideways, her back pressed against a man I did not recognize. Her head tilted slightly toward him in a way that was familiar to me, a posture I had seen 100 times when she wanted attention. The man had one arm resting casually behind her, his hand settled at her waist like it belonged there. In his other hand was a short glass of whiskey, half gone. He smiled, relaxed, unbothered. Sienna moved against him with no hesitation. No confusion, no resistance. I felt something hollow open in my chest, not sharp, not dramatic, just empty and cold. I replayed it. Then again, I looked for signs of editing, of something being out of context. There were none. The bar's logo was visible behind them. The same place 2 blocks from our apartment. The timestamp confirmed it had been recorded less than 10 minutes earlier. I exited the video and opened the second one. This angle was closer. Sienna leaned in toward the man, her mouth near his ear. I could not hear what she said over the music, but I recognized the intimacy of it. His fingers tightened slightly at her waist. He nodded, amused, like she had said something reassuring. The familiarity between them was not new. It had weight to it. I noticed what she was wearing then. The jacket. The dark leather jacket I bought her last winter, the one she rarely wore because she said it felt too heavy for club nights. She had worn it tonight anyway. The third video was the shortest. The camera caught the man lifting his glass, glancing directly toward the lens, and smirking as if he knew exactly who would see it later. He did not look surprised. He looked entertained. I stared at the screen until it dimmed. My phone vibrated again. Landon was calling back. I answered without speaking. "Adrian," he said, his voice tight. "I'm still here." "How long?" I asked. My voice sounded steady, which surprised me. "Since about 2:40, he said. "I saw them come in together." Together. I stood up slowly and walked to the window. The city outside was quiet, unaware. "You're sure it's her?" "Yes," Landon said. "There's no question." "Who's the guy?" "I don't know him personally," Landon said. "But he knows about you." That made me turn back toward the phone. "What do you mean?" "He was talking earlier," Landon said. "Bragging. Said he was waiting for his girl to ditch her fiancé. Said the fiancé was clueless." The word landed heavily, as if it had been aimed. I ended the call without explaining why. My hands moved on their own after that. I pulled on jeans, a shirt, grabbed my wallet and keys. I did not bother turning on the lights. I did not sit down to think. Thought would only slow things down. As I moved through the apartment, I noticed how untouched everything was. Sienna's shoes by the door, her bag on the chair, the faint smell of her perfume still in the hallway. She had told me earlier that night she was visiting her cousin. She had even smiled when she said it, kissed my cheek, promised to be back early. I opened my phone again and checked our shared calendar. Nothing unusual. No note. No reminder. Just an empty night. Another message came in, this time from a different name. Caleb Moore, Sienna's younger brother. "Why are people tagging my sister at a club right now?" She told everyone she was out of town. My chest tightened again, but this time with something sharper. The video was already moving beyond Landon. People were seeing it, talking, drawing their own conclusions. I typed a reply, erased it, typed again, erased it again. I did not send anything. I locked the phone and walked out the door. The drive to the club took 12 minutes. I know because I checked the clock at every red light. Traffic was light, the streets nearly empty. The city felt suspended, as if nothing bad was allowed to happen at this hour. My mind, on the other hand, was moving fast, pulling apart the last few months with cruel efficiency. Late work nights that never came with overtime pay. Sudden interest in new music, new bars, new people I had never met. The way she had started guarding her phone more carefully. None of it seemed obvious before. Now it lined up too cleanly. When I turned onto the street where the club sat, my hands tightened on the steering wheel. I saw her car before I even slowed down. The silver sedan was parked crookedly near the entrance, exactly where she always left it when she was in a hurry. Beside it was a black luxury sedan, clean, expensive, unmistakably deliberate in the way it occupied space. I parked across the street and sat there for a moment, engine running. My phone buzzed again. Landon, they're still inside. I shut off the engine. Before I stepped out, I checked the time one last time. 3:15 a.m. 15 minutes after the first video. I crossed the street and joined the short line at the entrance. The bouncer glanced at my ID and waved me through without interest. The bass hit me immediately, heavy and relentless. Lights strobed across the room, making everything feel fractured, unreal. I scanned the bar instinctively. It took less than 5 seconds to find them. Sienna stood exactly where she had been in the videos, only closer now, her body angled comfortably against the man's. He was taller than I expected, broad-shouldered, wearing a watch that caught the light when he lifted his glass. His posture was relaxed, unguarded, like someone who believed the situation was already settled. They laughed together. Not nervously, not awkwardly, easily. I stopped a few feet away and watched. I wanted to see if anything would change on its own. It did not. Sienna rested her hand on his arm. He leaned in closer. There was no hesitation, no second thought, no sign of guilt. She turned her head and saw me. For a fraction of a second, her expression emptied completely, like a screen losing power. Then panic rushed in to fill the space. Her hand dropped from his arm. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. The man followed her gaze. He looked at me with curiosity, not fear. Then recognition dawned slowly, followed by something close to amusement. That was when I understood something important. This was not a mistake that had gotten out of control. This was something they believed they had already won. And I was the last part of it catching up. Standing there, a few steps away from them, I realized something that no video could have prepared me for. Watching betrayal on a screen gives your mind room to negotiate with itself. Seeing it in front of you strips that away. There was no distortion from lighting now, no shaky angle, no possibility of misunderstanding. The room smelled like alcohol and sweat. The music thudded through my ribs, and Sienna was pressed close enough to this man that the space between them had already been erased. I did not rush forward. I did not raise my voice. I stayed where I was and watched them for a few more seconds, because I needed to be certain there was no illusion left to break. The man's hand rested where it should not have been. Sienna did not move away from it. She leaned in again, instinctively, before she remembered I was there. Her eyes met mine a second time, and that was when she understood this was not a moment she could talk her way out of. She shifted, stepping away from him abruptly, but the damage was already permanent. The movement itself confirmed what words never could. The man turned his body fully toward me then. He took his time setting the glass down on the bar. He looked me up and down in a way that was assessing rather than defensive, like someone evaluating a problem that had arrived later than expected. I recognized that look. It was the look of someone who believed the worst part was already over. Around us, people continued drinking and laughing, unaware or uninterested. The nightclub did not pause for private disasters. The music surged, the lights pulsed, and the bar staff moved with mechanical focus. Sienna tried to step toward me, her hands half raised, her face tight with something that might have been fear or calculation. Before she could reach me, a woman slid in front of her. Naomi Reed. I recognized her immediately. She worked with Sienna, had been at our apartment twice for small gatherings, always polite, always distant. Now her face was pale, her eyes flicking between me and the man at the bar. Naomi's presence changed the shape of the situation instantly. This was no longer a private mistake. It had witnesses who knew exactly what was happening. Naomi leaned toward Sienna and said something I could not hear over the music. Sienna shook her head quickly, her gaze darting back to me, then to the exits. The man at the bar watched this exchange with mild interest, not concern. I stepped closer, not aggressively, just enough to make it clear I was not leaving. That was when the man finally spoke to me, his tone casual, almost friendly. He said my name as if we had been introduced before. The familiarity was deliberate. I did not respond. Sienna tried again to move toward me, but Naomi caught her arm, tightening her grip. That small act told me more than any confession could have. Naomi was not surprised. She was managing a situation that had gone wrong. The man glanced past me and raised his hand slightly. A server appeared almost immediately, asking if everything was all right. The man smiled and nodded, reassuring her with ease. That smile was practiced. I felt my phone vibrate in my pocket. I did not look at it yet. The tension between us began to draw attention. A few nearby patrons slowed their movements, watching openly now. Someone recognized me, or recognized the situation, because murmurs started to ripple outward. The videos had not stayed contained. 2 security staff members moved in, positioning themselves near us. Their presence was calm but firm, their eyes trained on me. To them, I was the unknown variable, the outsider entering a space already primed for conflict. I understood that immediately. I raised my hand slightly, not in surrender, but in clarity. I did not touch anyone. I did not shout. I simply stood there, looking at the woman I was supposed to marry. That restraint unsettled Sienna more than anger would have. Her breathing quickened, and she glanced around as if searching for a script that would make sense of this. Naomi leaned closer to her again, whispering urgently. The man at the bar leaned back against the counter, arms crossed loosely. He looked at me with something close to sympathy, which made my stomach tighten. That was when my phone vibrated again, harder this time. I pulled it out and saw multiple messages stacking up. Landon. Unknown numbers. A group notification I did not recognize. One message preview stood out. A screenshot of the same nightclub scene, posted somewhere public, already collecting comments. I looked up at Sienna and realized she had not checked her phone in several minutes. It was still sitting on the bar behind her, unattended, the screen lighting up repeatedly with notifications she could not see. The security staff stepped closer, one of them speaking to me calmly, asking if there was a problem. I told him there was not, that I was leaving. That was not entirely true, but it was enough to de-escalate the moment. Sienna's face tightened with relief for half a second, until she realized what I meant. I did not leave the club. I stepped past her instead, moving toward the bar. I picked up her phone before she could stop me. She lunged forward instinctively, but Naomi grabbed her again, harder this time. Sienna froze when she realized what I was holding. The man's posture changed then, just slightly. His shoulders straightened, his smile fading. For the first time, I saw calculation flicker behind his eyes. I unlocked the phone without hesitation. The code had not changed. That detail landed harder than I expected. It meant she had not thought she needed to hide this from me yet. Notifications flooded the screen. Messages from Naomi. From numbers without names. From group chats I did not belong to. I opened the most recent thread and scrolled. Weeks of fragments appeared. Short confirmations. Meeting locations. References to things I had been told were work obligations. The conversation was partially erased, but not carefully enough. Enough remained to map the pattern. I looked up at Naomi. Her face told me everything before she said a word. She had known. She had helped. The security staff noticed the shift in the room and moved closer again, sensing the situation was changing. One of them asked Sienna if she wanted to leave. She nodded too quickly. Sienna tried to reach for her phone. I stepped back, holding it out of reach, not threatening, just final. She stopped moving then, her shoulders slumping slightly as reality settled in. The man at the bar straightened fully and stepped closer, his voice lowering. He told me this did not need to become complicated. He told me there was no reason to involve other people. That was when I understood something else. He believed he had leverage. I handed the phone to the nearest security staff member and asked him to hold it for a moment. The request surprised him, but he complied, glancing between us warily. Sienna stared at me, stunned. The room felt suddenly smaller, the music louder, the lights harsher. Conversations nearby had stopped entirely. People were openly watching now, phones out, documenting the aftermath of something they did not understand but sensed was important. Naomi whispered something urgent to Sienna, then turned and slipped into the crowd without waiting for a response. She disappeared quickly, leaving Sienna alone. The security staff began guiding Sienna toward the exit. She resisted at first, looking at me with something close to desperation, then allowed herself to be led away. As she passed me, her eyes searched my face for anger, for pleading, for anything familiar. I gave her nothing. The man remained behind, watching her go. When she was out of sight, he looked back at me, his expression hardening. Around us, the club resumed its rhythm reluctantly. Music swelled again. People turned back to their drinks, satisfied they had witnessed enough. The security staff returned Sienna's phone to me briefly so I could hand it back to her outside. When I stepped out into the cooler air, she was already halfway down the sidewalk, her steps unsteady, her head down. I did not follow her. I stayed inside long enough to look at the man one last time. He raised his glass again, but this time his hand shook slightly. That was when I knew this was no longer contained to one night, one place, or one mistake. This was already spreading. I did not go home after the club. I walked until the noise faded and the streets thinned, until my breathing matched my pace and the night air burned some of the alcohol out of my head, even though I had not had a drink. The city looked different at that hour, stripped of performance. Windows were dark. Traffic lights changed for no one. It felt appropriate. My phone kept vibrating. I did not answer it. I needed a few minutes where nothing asked me to react. When I finally stopped, I sat on a low concrete wall near a closed storefront and checked the messages in the order they arrived. Landon first, then numbers I recognized, then numbers I did not. The pattern was obvious even before I finished reading. The video had escaped the room and grown legs. People who had been inside the club had sent it to people who were not. Those people had opinions. Some wanted details. Others wanted permission to take sides. I called Landon. He answered immediately. "You all right?" "I'm standing," I said. "That's enough for now." He told me he had left the club after Sienna did. He told me Naomi disappeared into the crowd and Victor stayed until closing, talking to anyone who would listen. He told me the staff had asked questions they did not normally ask because too many people were filming. "His name's Victor Hale," Landon said. I asked around. The name landed with a weight I did not like. "Do I know it?" "Not directly," he said. "But he knows your company." That was the first time the night crossed a line from personal into structural. I asked Landon what he meant, and he told me Victor was a regional director at a firm that supplied 2 of our largest accounts. He had been at industry mixers. He had shaken hands with people who shook hands with me. I ended the call and stared at the pavement. I checked Sienna's phone again, slower this time. I did not scroll aimlessly. I traced. Calendar entries lined up with messages. Late meetings that overlapped with nights, she said she was exhausted. Conferences she attended where Victor's firm had been present. The gaps between conversations told a clearer story than the messages themselves. Someone had tried to clean this up and failed. I found hotel confirmations forwarded from an address that did not belong to her. I found a reminder for a presentation dinner. On a night I remembered clearly because I had eaten alone and told myself that was normal. I stood up and started walking again. By the time the sky began to lighten at the edges, my phone rang with a name I did not expect to see so early. Marilyn Moore, Sienna's mother. I answered because not answering would only delay what was coming. She spoke quickly, controlled, as if she had rehearsed the opening sentence. She told me Sienna had called her crying. She told me there had been a misunderstanding. She told me alcohol had been involved and that people had a cruel habit of filming women at their worst moments. I listened without interrupting. When she finished, I asked if she wanted the timeline. There was a pause. What timeline? I described it. Dates, locations, names. I did not editorialize. I did not raise my voice. I told her what had been recorded, what had been witnessed, and what could be verified independently. I told her about Victor's job and the overlap with Sienna's work. I told her about Naomi. Silence stretched long enough that I checked the call was still connected. When Marilyn spoke again, her voice had changed. She asked me to send her whatever I had. I told her I would not send videos. I would send timestamps and names. She agreed. When the call ended, my phone rang again immediately. Caleb Moore. He did not ask me what happened. He asked me what was true. I told him the same way I told his mother. Facts, not interpretation. He went quiet near the end, then told me something I had not known. Victor had been introduced to their family months earlier as a mentor. Someone who was helping Sienna navigate corporate politics. The phrase stuck with me because it sounded rehearsed. I asked Caleb who made that introduction. He said Sienna had. He said their father had been skeptical. He said he thought nothing of it until last night. After we hung up, I opened my email and began canceling things. The venue first, then the caterer, then the photographer. Each cancellation generated a confirmation and a penalty. Each penalty felt like a receipt for time already lost. I paid them without hesitation. It was cheaper than pretending. By mid-morning, my phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number. The caller introduced herself as someone from Victor's company, Human Resources. She spoke carefully, choosing neutral language. She said an internal complaint had been filed. She said my name had come up. She asked if I was willing to confirm basic information. I asked her what the complaint involved. She did not give details, but she did not need to. She said Victor had been placed on leave pending review. She said there were concerns about conduct at a client-adjacent social event. I told her I would confirm what I could. I confirmed dates. I confirmed presence. I did not speculate. When the call ended, I felt something close to nausea, not from guilt, but from the realization that this had already outgrown me. Sienna tried to call around noon. I let it ring. She sent a message saying she wanted to explain. I did not open it. Landon stopped by my apartment that afternoon. He brought coffee and a look that suggested he had already seen more than he wanted to. He told me mutual friends were arguing in group chats I was not part of anymore. He told me Naomi had taken the day off work and told people she felt unsafe. He told me Victor had been escorted out of his office by security which sounded dramatic until you remembered how corporate buildings handled optics. We sat at my kitchen table and said very little. Silence felt more honest than analysis. In the evening, my phone buzzed again with an update from HR. Victor's leave had become a termination pending final review. There were additional complaints. Unrelated. Older. The word pattern suggested a file that had been waiting for a reason to be opened. I forwarded the message to Marilyn without commentary. An hour later, Sienna came to the apartment. I did not invite her in. She stood in the hallway, eyes red, posture stiff, trying to decide whether to plead or perform. She told me she had been overwhelmed. She told me Victor had promised to help her career. She told me it had not meant what it looked like. I did not argue. I told her the wedding was canceled. I told her the apartment lease would be handled through the property manager. I told her she needed to collect her things when I was not home. She asked me if there was anything she could say that would change my mind. I told her no. That answer landed harder than any accusation. She nodded once, like someone accepting a diagnosis, and left without another word. After she was gone, I sat on the floor and looked at the empty space where her shoes had been. The quiet was not peaceful. It was final. Later that night, Landon texted me a screenshot of a post I had not seen. Someone had written a warning about workplace power dynamics and tagged Victor's company. Comments stacked beneath it, each one sharpening the edges of the story. I put my phone down and turned off the lights. This was no longer a private collapse. It was a public record being written in real time. The quiet after a collapse is not peaceful. It is administrative. That was the first thing I noticed in the days that followed. There was no dramatic aftermath, no single moment where everything settled. Instead, there were emails, confirmations, updates, requests for statements, and subtle shifts in how people spoke to me. Life did not stop. It reorganized itself around what had happened. I returned to work 2 days later. My manager did not bring it up directly. He did not need to. Everyone already knew something had happened, even if they did not know the full shape of it. People avoided eye contact in hallways. Meetings that usually included small talk began abruptly and ended early. I was not punished. I was observed. Midweek, I was asked to sit in on a call with our legal department and an external compliance officer. The subject line referenced third-party conduct. Victor's name came up within the first 5 minutes. They did not ask me to speculate. They did not ask me to relive the night. They asked narrow questions about presence, introductions, timelines. I answered carefully. Precision mattered now more than emotion ever could. When the call ended, my manager thanked me for staying professional. The word landed strangely. I had not thought of professionalism as something that applied to betrayal, but here we were. Later that afternoon, Landon forwarded me a message from someone I had not spoken to in years. The person had been at the club. They had recognized Sienna. They had recognized me. They wrote that they had not known what to do in the moment, but they wanted me to know that what happened had been visible, unmistakable, and witnessed by people who did not have a stake in the outcome. I did not reply. That evening, I met with the property manager to adjust the lease. Sienna's name came off the documents without drama. The manager asked if everything was all right in a tone that suggested they did not expect an answer. I signed where I was told to sign and walked out with a folder under my arm. Sienna came once more to collect her things. I was not home. That had been intentional. Landon stayed in the apartment while she packed. He told me later that she moved quickly, methodically, as if afraid that stopping would undo her resolve. She did not linger. She did not leave notes. She took what was hers and nothing extra. When I returned that night, the apartment felt larger. Empty shelves, bare closet space, the faint impression of furniture that had been moved recently. I opened the windows and let the air change. 2 days later, Victor's termination became official. I learned about it not from gossip, but from an internal memo circulated quietly among senior staff at his former company. The language was neutral. It cited violations of conduct policy and failure to disclose conflicts of interest. It did not mention names beyond his. It did not mention Sienna. That absence mattered. It told me this had been bigger than one affair. The following week, Naomi resigned. No announcement. No explanation. Her name disappeared from email threads. Someone mentioned she had taken a position elsewhere, then corrected themselves and said they were not sure. I did not ask. The reasons did not matter anymore. Sienna's parents reached out once more. Her father asked to meet for coffee. I agreed. We sat across from each other in a quiet place where no one recognized us. He apologized for not seeing what was happening sooner. He did not ask me to reconsider anything. He asked me if I was all right. It was the most useful question anyone had asked. I told him I was functioning. He nodded, understanding exactly what that meant. By the end of the month, the wedding had ceased to exist as a concept. Invitations were void. Deposits were absorbed into penalties. The date passed unnoticed by most people, marked only by a reminder in my calendar that I deleted without ceremony. I sold the engagement ring through a private jeweler. The transaction was efficient. The money went directly toward closing accounts we had shared. No symbolism. No gestures. Just resolution. Landon and I met one evening at a small bar neither of us had visited before. It was quiet, the kind of place that did not encourage spectacle. We talked about other things. Work. Plans. Movies neither of us had seen yet. At one point, he asked me if I regretted going to the club that night. I told him no. He asked if I regretted staying as calm as I had. I told him that calm had not been restraint. It had been clarity. Weeks passed. Then months. Victor moved cities. I learned this indirectly through a professional contact who mentioned a sudden vacancy in a regional role. The contact did not know why it was open. They did not ask. Sienna tried to contact me once more, long after the last logistical thread had been cut. The message was brief. She said she hoped I was doing well. She said she wanted to apologize properly. I did not respond. Not out of spite, but because the apology would not have been for me. It would have been for the version of herself that wanted the story to end differently. One night, while attending a small gathering hosted by someone I barely knew, I overheard a conversation that made me pause. Two people were talking about a nightclub incident they had seen online months earlier. They referred to it casually, as an example of why mixing personal relationships with professional ambition was dangerous. They did not know me. They did not know Sienna. The story had detached itself from its origin. I stood there, listening, and felt something settle. The betrayal had not followed me. It had passed through me and continued on, reshaped into a lesson other people would reference without context. That was fine. Stories did not need owners once they were complete. When I left that gathering, I walked home instead of taking a ride. The night air was cool. The city felt ordinary again. Not forgiving, just indifferent. Back in my apartment, I turned off my phone and sat for a moment in the quiet. There was nothing left to manage. No one waiting for a response. No version of the past that could still argue its case. What had happened, and what followed had been enough.